ghost town. As New Orleans is left deserted, attention turns to the thousands of hurricane victims.
For the first time, the operation on these streets is changing from rescuing the living to recovering the dead.
Senior members of George Bush's government have today been touring the hurricane disaster zone as the United States is forced to ask the European Union and NATO for emergency help. We'll have the latest live from New Orleans. Also tonight, an exclusive report from inside the new home of thousands of evacuees. And the lucky survivors' stories as 131 Britons remain unaccounted for.
It was disgusting, it was scary, it was chaos. It was just horrible.
Hello, good evening. All week they've been bringing out the living from the drowned city of New Orleans, the survivors of Hurricane Katrina. Today, the massive evacuation over, America turned its thoughts to bringing out the dead from what is now little more than a watery ghost town. Its streets are canals and in their waters countless bodies lie unclaimed. For the first time, even senior American officials admitted today that the death toll could be in the thousands. And as for the survivors, their needs are now so great that America, the most powerful nation on earth, has had to ask the European Union for help. Our international editor, Bill Neely, is in New Orleans. Bill.
Well, this is quite a remarkable place. I've certainly never seen anything like this. A major city virtually emptied of its people. More than 50,000 people evacuated in the last couple of days. And the American government has now finally asked for help from the outside world. And when you travel these streets, as I did today, you see how much that help is desperately needed. An early morning journey through a half-submerged city, and it's eerie. The buildings torn apart by wind, or flooded, or burned, like the cars. Most of them will never be used again. It's Sunday morning, but the churches that remain stand empty and battered by this act of God. It was a city of 500,000 people. There are now perhaps a few hundred left, but they are remarkably upbeat.
I like it, really. I do, because it's such a drastic change and it's so completely out of your control.
If I have to leave here, I've left here victorious over nature.
Because you've survived.
I survived. Not only have I survived, I've survived well.
But so many did not. The lifeless float on the streets they walked last Sunday. The people above can see their dead neighbours below. They won't leave because they're scared by reports of killing and raping in the city.
We tried to leave the convention center, they're killing people.
They got rapists
the Superdome, they got rapists.
They're frightened too by what lies beneath the water that traps them. For the first time, the operation on these streets is changing from rescuing the living to recovering the dead. The problem is that most of the dead are either underneath this water or trapped in these houses. Now, until this floodwater is drained, they will remain there. The true death toll won't be known, and the floodwater may not be drained for several months. And still, the buildings smoulder and the gas leaks. There's danger here. Many have wanted to be rescued for 6 days, and finally their day has come. Some clinging to life, barely able to move, lacking food and water. This, his only chance of life. This elderly woman had sought refuge in a local school, clinging to her walking stick and her Coast Guard rescuer. Her belongings in bin bags on her knee. By night, Air Force Special Operations, more used to working in Iraq, bring child after child to safety. Anxious faces, trying times. This city resembles a ghost town, deserted roads leading to the empty Superdome. The only clue that tens of thousands sheltered here, the rubbish they left behind. President Bush has now asked for help from the European Union and NATO. For first aid, blankets, water lorries, food for 500,000. America finally conceding the enormity of this tragedy. Well, so far, the US government is putting the death toll at thousands. It's also saying the number of refugees are up to 1 million. But so far, not a single member of the US government, the cabinet, has actually set foot on these streets. Now, Donald Rumsfeld was on the outskirts of the city today, but he was visiting mostly helicopter pilots. George Bush is due here tomorrow, but don't expect the people here to thank either Mr. Rumsfeld or President Bush. They are furious. They won't forget this, and they certainly won't forgive their government for its response. You know, we always wondered what would define George Bush's second term apart from the disaster in Iraq. We now know it is the disaster in New Orleans.
Thank you, Bill. The evacuees have been taken to special shelters all along the Gulf Coast. They may be safe, but their future could hardly be bleaker. They have lost everything. 15,000 of them are inside Houston Astrodome. Our correspondent Martin Geisler is the only British journalist to have gained independent access there.
This is the scale of the problem. The thousands strewn out on the stadium floor, just 1% of those left destitute by Hurricane Katrina. They've lost their homes, their possessions and their privacy, but there are moments when none of that matters. A loved one appearing among the survivors. Most here, though, continue the desperate search for friends and family, praying they're not among the thousands feared dead.
There is no future. Nobody have future. We don't have a home, but we don't care. We want her to be alive and her daughter. That's all we want. We want her back.
Martha Stewart's search is for her sister and her baby niece.
We want her back.
Volunteers are now trying to make a database of the displaced, but behind them, the scale of this chaos is clear. A sea of notes scribbled on scraps of paper and stuck to a wall. A bulletin board thrown together by the desperate.
I'm here by myself. And my brother.
You've lost everyone?
Yeah.
When did you last see your brother?
In New Orleans, before the storm.
My hometown is just wiped away right now, and I'm looking for my whole family.
Almost everyone among the thousands gathered in this hall is looking for someone in their family, and there are very few here who could tell you honestly that they know what the future holds. Yet, in a curious way, most seem to accept that they're the lucky ones. There are stories of survival in the face of overwhelming adversity. Mark Burrell had to strap his disabled wife and son to the roof of his house. They waited for 3 days before help arrived.
At night, the mosquitoes would come out, roaches crawling everywhere all on them. My children scared, my wife scared, and all I could do is talk to them and comfort them. You know, keep them comfortable, try and keep their mind off where we was at and what was going on. And we survived.
Conditions here are basic, to say the very least, but for the thousands of refugees, it's a start. They have food and water, though very little else. The priority now is finding their families. Only then can they look to the future, whatever that may hold. Martin Geisler, ITV News, Houston.
131 Britons are still unaccounted for across those states devastated by the hurricane. The Foreign Office says work is underway to find them. The first British survivors began arriving back here today, to the relief of many anxious waiting relatives. Nina Nanar reports.
There she is, she's there.
At last, the anguish of the wait is over. For days, they'd been trapped in hellish conditions in New Orleans Superdome. Today, arriving back at Gatwick Airport, young British holidaymakers were clearly relieved the nightmare was over, though the memories of their ordeal were still raw.
Horrible. Really hurt. It's intimidating. It was horrible.
It was disgusting, it was scary, it was chaos. It was just horrible.
The Britons, amongst a group of around 30, told of how they banded together in the Superdome to stay safe.
You're constantly on your guard, you're scared, you don't know what's coming next, you don't want to move out your seat.
Back home in Surrey, hours later, his family criticised the British Embassy for what they claimed was a lack of support.
I would have liked to have seen them do a lot more. It just seemed to be disorganised, and they didn't seem to have any authority, any plan, any way of dealing with it.
It remains unclear how many Britons may still be stranded along America's Gulf Coast. Those back today will clearly struggle to get over what they've seen. Nina Nanar, ITV News.
And that is the news tonight. Coverage of the Hurricane Katrina relief operation continues on the ITV News channel. But for now, from the Weekend team and from me, goodbye.